Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Fix Computers. This is a MacBook Pro A1990 and this one came in with no power. Now I've already done an assessment on this one because the customer was in a mega hurry and I was like, I'll have a quick look at it and just figure out what we're up against, you know, blah blah blah. When I took the back cover off, and after taking the bottom cover off, I immediately noticed there was a tiny spot of liquid damage over here. And you can see on the back of the lid there, just a little bit of corrosion there. Now, there was a big angry spot of corrosion on this capacitor. I brushed that off so I could measure it, and there is indeed a short on the circuit board there. And we'll look a bit closer at that in a moment. So I brushed that off, measured it. There was a short. So I called the customer and said, yes, it's going to need board repair. Do you want me to continue? And they said, yes. So that's where we're up to. Now, I'm hoping that that's it. But because there's liquid damage, motherboard's got to come out. We've got to check the other side and see if there's anything else there. So fingers crossed, I'm hoping that this one is as straightforward as it looks and it's just a bad capacitor on the edge of the board there. So let's start disassembling this and then we'll take the board out, we'll take a closer look at what is damaged, and we can discuss that, because there are a couple of caveats involved in looking at this particular bit of damage, and I want to go over those with you and just talk about that. Thankfully, I don't think they apply to this particular one, but for the sake of education, we'll go over these things. So I guess I'll roll the intro while I just start taking all the screws out, and then when we get to the main part of the disassembly, we can go through it step by step. See you in a moment, everyone. Right, that's all the super fiddly stuff undone. So now I've just got to take out some motherboard screws and the heatsink screws, and we're ready to lift out. So kind of intimidating to disassemble these more modern Macs, but they do fundamentally work in exactly the same way as any other laptop. It's just very tightly packed. But yeah, if you undo all of the cables around the outer edges, take these screws out the center, and the whole thing will just lift out. So don't be scared of them, just go slowly. And also you need to have a TX3 screwdriver, and they'll just arbitrarily switch to and from 3 and 5 whenever they feel like it. Right, that's all of our screws and stuff undone. So I've just gone around and just picked out all of the cables connecting, except for that one, which I forgot. Anything else I've missed? Got the wireless. Don't forget the display connector. Easily missed. Yep, that's all done. So now I should just be able to start lifting this out. I'm just going to go slowly and just make sure that I'm not catching anything or that I haven't forgotten to undo anything. It's fine. I'm being held up by the rubber grommets at the moment. Try again. That's clear, that's clear. There we go. And did I waste my time? Yeah. Worth taking it out to dust, but there's no liquid damage back there. That's a good thing though. Alright. Cool. Right, so I'm going to put the body of the laptop to one side, and we'll take a closer look at this, and I'll show you the liquid damage and what we're going to do about that. So, as you can see, we've got a very tired looking capacitor there that I've given the brushies, and the end caps are just gone entirely. It's just a brown square now. a brown ceramic square. That's what a capacitor should look like. And this one, as you can see, does not look like that. Now, the end caps will often be the first things to corrode off of a capacitor. Oh, actually, they might still be there. Oh, yeah, no, they're just... well, they're not a lot of use, is the important thing there. So, firstly, the big concern is the area of the board that we're looking at is really important. Underneath these stickers here are the NAND chips. That's the SSD chips. It's not correct to call this the SSD because the NAND controller is elsewhere. But these are the actual storage chips, and this is the power supply to those storage chips. Now, if this power supply gets messed up, you've probably lost the data and you've probably lost the motherboard, unless you're a superstar who can do NAND replacement, which isn't me. So, obviously, at this point, as soon as I saw corrosion on this spot, I was like, uh-oh, we're in trouble. So, if we put our black probe on a ground screw hole and we measure on this side, I think we'll see ground. So, yeah, that's 0.1 ohm. So, that's mega ground. That's planet Earth ground. And if we check the other side of it, we get 0.28, 0.27 ohms. So again, nice deep short to ground there. So we found our short, and it's almost certainly this capacitor just because of the sheer state of the thing. That was the boy that was corrupted, so it's almost definitely that capacitor. Now, let's bring up the board view software and have a look at a top-down view so we can talk about what's happened to this and why this is a problem with Apple design and why it's always been an issue with Apple designs and just Apple design philosophy. So this motherboard is the 820-01041 logic board, and the area we're looking at, this is the top side of the board, that's the bottom, and on the top side of the board we've got the cutouts for the fans, as you saw, and we're looking in the right hand section over here. So let's just come over here and zoom down to there. So firstly, this chip here is the power supply into the NAND. So U9080 is a two-phase power supply. It's got an inductor on each side of it. So that one goes into switch 1, which is phase 1, and switch 2, which is phase 2. And then those both output onto PP2V5 underscore NAND underscore SSD0. And then we've got some bulk bypass capacitors on here. And I believe we also do on the other side as well, if I flip the board. And then these guys are also PP2V5 underscore NAND. So these capacitors are all along the edge of the board. These capacitors are all along the edge of the board. And if one of these capacitors dies or gets covered in water, it causes a dead short on this power rail. And that will probably explode the NAND chips if you're unlucky. However, if you're lucky, they might survive. But U9080 is really fragile. And if there is a short on one of these capacitors, it will cause an overcurrent in U9080 and almost certainly kill U9080. Now, this bit is really important because you can't tell if U9080 is dead or not until you power on the laptop. You have to replace it anyway. Because if you don't replace U9080 and it is dead, it might put 19 volts from PP-Bus G3 hot directly into the NAND chips. And now you've definitely killed the motherboard. So if you have a short on these capacitors, you need to replace U9080. Now, for experienced repair techs, that's not a big deal. I'm kind of scared of BGA, so I really don't want to replace U9080. However, my capacitor that is dead is this guy here, C9080. And as you can see, this is actually part of the input side. PP-Bus G3 hot is our main power rail. So we've got a main power rail coming in, and this is the input capacitance. Remember in the recent video with the Dell, where we had power stages and bulk bypass capacitors providing that reservoir of power for the power supply. This is U9080. These are the two bypass capacitors, both 10 microfarads, that provide that reservoir of power So when U9080 suddenly pulls current, it's got a small reservoir to pull power out of, while PP-Bus G3 Hot all picks up the slack. So one of our bypass caps is gone. So now the good news is that because this is on the input side of it, we don't actually have any faults on this power rail, and we'll measure that to make sure. So let's go back to the microscope. And as you can see, even though we've got that short on PP-Bus G3 Hot, if we come up here to PP2V5, that is reading in the 12 kilo ohms plus. So our NAND rail is actually okay. So this is great news for me. It means that I can get away with not replacing U9080 because we've no reason to believe there's damage to it at this point. There's a very good chance that I just need to replace that capacitor. But the reason why I've gone into all of this detail is to stress upon you that when you have a fault in this area, you must double check things. And if you've had a bad capacitor that is on PP2V5, like one of these guys, or one of the 4 that are on the other side of the board, let's just flip over and check those. There's the guys on the back. If any of these guys get damaged, or any of these guys get damaged, you're replacing U9080. That's not optional, you have to. Otherwise, well, unless you're going for a YOLO, but if you're going for a YOLO, you better hope there's no data on that laptop. So, with that being the case, let's take this completely wrecked capacitor off of the board and make sure that our short disappears. So, I'm going to put my heat-proof hard drive underneath the board, and we'll get some hot air onto that. I'm going to put some fresh solder on each side of this just to try and soften it up a little bit, so I have to use as little heat as possible with the hot air. Whoops, rip that water damage indicator. And I'm going to turn the board around so I can get better access. I like to keep the board in one orientation to make the video easier to follow. However, remember, make the board work for you. Don't work at awkward angles. Alright, can I get in there? There's hardly anything left of that end cap, so I don't know how well this is going to go. Nah, I tried. That's probably good enough. Alright, and I'm going to put this little metal shield over the top of the sticker just to protect that from a little bit of the heat that I'm going to put down. It's not super essential, it just helps avoid cosmetic damage. I need a smaller nozzle here, but it's fine. Whoops. Well, that was easy. Yeah. To be honest, I think that probably would have come off if I'd given it a hard look. But don't try and rip capacitors off the board, because while now and then that'll work, but if you get unlucky, you'll just rip the pad off, and then you'll be like, why did I do that? Why didn't I just desolder it like a normal person? So, yeah. I'm just going to touch those pads just to clean them a little bit. And now, is our short circuit gone? So, go back into resistance mode and we'll check again. There we go. So, PP-Bus G3 Hot is no longer shorted to ground. Good. For a moment there I saw 12 kilo ohms and I was like, that's the same as PP2V2. That concerns me. However, I released and then I checked again and it went up into the mega ohms. So remember in the previous video, or well, in another recent video of a HP laptop, I pointed out that sometimes when you go to measure a rail that has a lot of capacitance on it, you'll initially see a low value where your multimeter is estimating based on the inrush current. Then suddenly all of the capacitors charge up a little bit off of the multimeter and they suddenly go high resistance. So either the resistance suddenly skyrockets or you release a measure again and see a completely different value that's massively higher. That's what happened just then. So yeah. When I saw the same resistance at PP-G3 hot as I did on PP5V2, 2V5, sorry, that would have been a bit concerning because that might have meant that this guy had suddenly been killed and was shorted all the way through, which would have been very strange, but basically it's unusual to see identical resistances across different rails. They usually have their own resistances, so I will get my trusty 106 capacitors, and as a special treat, they're the correct size for this laptop. Huh. And I keep those on my desk because you need them all the time when you're doing this. Right, I need some flux, and I'm going to wick down those pads, and I'm going to try and soldering iron hero this. I'm going to turn the board around again for a better angle. It's kind of swings and roundabouts. If I have it one way around, then I bump into the NAND enclosure, and if I have it the other way around, I'm bumping into U9080, so yeah. However, from this angle, I can get the wick in, which is what I want. There we go. There's something really satisfying about wicking down pads, cleaning them, and then seeing that perfect flush motherboard underneath it with all the traces exposed. I love this part of the repair. And now instead of having to bodge something in, you've got those lovely clean surfaces like you're doing it from scratch. There's a strong argument that you don't need to bother doing all the wicking down. You can just plonk another capacitor in there, blast it with the heat gun, and bam, you're done. But doing it this way is very satisfying. And here's our new capacitor, which won't come off the end of the tweezers. I'm using the point of the iron, which is terrible. There, I got it straight. There we go. Now I'm going to lift the board up and watch it be super tombstoned. Egads, it's flat. Alright, we're good. Let's turn the board around and get the other side. There we go. Right, now I'll put down a little bit of flux and just reflow those. Could have done this in any order. A lot of the time my first phase is just getting the solder onto the board and the parts and then worrying about finishing it nicely. There we go. That's fine. All right. There we go. And I will check again for shorts just to make sure that nothing has magically gone wrong somehow while I was doing all of that. Yep, so there we've got, you know, about 12 kilo ohms again. And if I come off, and I check again. Now it's in the megohms. There's probably an explanation as to why your multimeter will take that particular range and then skyrocket, other than just capacitors charging, but I don't know the details. It's probably to do with just how the multimeter calculates the resistance. Like, because it's been given a line that skyrockets, it's just taken a particular snapshot and tried to narrow down that or something. Good. Right, let's put this back in the chassis and see if it works. Am I going to do the... You know what, as a special treat, I'll do the thermal paste while I'm here. Because it'll probably do it good, and we're this far into the board already. GPU was actually okay, which is weird, but the CPU was pretty cooked. Worth doing though. These Macs do run hot because Apple are more interested in their computers being quiet than they are in their computers actually lasting. Which leads into that rant that I was going to have about Apple design and engineering, where we just have all of this mission critical stuff just hanging out on the side of the logic board again. And this is my grievance with Apple, that it's very difficult to convey when having a conversation with people, is that, you know, you design a product that is this expensive and made of exotic materials and does all kinds of really clever stuff, but at the same time you make such boneheaded engineering choices that make the device so vulnerable to liquid damage. And, like, I'm not asking them to make it water resistant per se, because making a laptop water resistant is A, arguably not within the scope of the product, and B, it's quite a tall order really, and if they did make it water resistant, we'd end up with like a sealed thing that's all glued shut and be even less repairable. So, like, be careful what you wish for, people. You know, sometimes when you ask for waterproof into the ocean, that's going to be a monkey paw wish, where you'll say, "Oh, I want my MacBook to be completely waterproof. Congratulations, it's now hermetically sealed, and you can't open it ever. So if anything fails on it, you're completely toast." So yeah, be careful what you wish for, people. But at the same time, they could put just a little bit of plastic wrap around the edge. They could put a baffle in the speaker grills that just means that liquid can't splash into the laptop and things like that. There are many things that you can do that mean that it won't be quite as vulnerable as it actually is. And Apple choose not to. But also remember that if you really want a Mac for reasons, but you don't want to give Apple money, the second-hand market is always a thing. You can buy a second-hand Mac which doesn't get Apple a dime, but gets you a nice Mac. And right now, in my opinion, the M1 Silicon Macs are pretty good bang for buck on the second-hand market. They've gone up a little bit recently, so, you know, keep your eye on the prices, but if you've always wanted a Mac, the second-hand MacBook Air M1s are surprisingly affordable at the time of recording. Good. Alright, I'm going to get this back in the chassis and reassemble it, and we'll check that it all works. So let's do the fast-forwardy bit. Right, that is all reassembled. Let's plug in a charger and just see if it charges. There's 5 volts. There's 20 volts. And the laptop is turned on. And at 2 amps, I'm fairly certain it's charging as well. And we should see that current is slowly creeping up as it starts ramping up the charge. And that's pretty much what we're seeing there. Yep, there's 3 amps. And that might push up a little bit higher. Yeah, it's looking for 3.2, 3.3. This is fine. And if I open the screen, we should find that's turned on as well. There we go, everyone. That is a functional laptop again. Eagle-Eye viewers will notice that it says 22% on the battery in the top right, but it doesn't say it's charging or anything. This is totally normal on the login screen. The login screen doesn't tell you this stuff because we're currently pre-boot. The laptop hasn't actually booted macOS. This is a pre-boot screen to unlock the laptop, and then it actually boots up and gives you more information. Although it has just gone up to 23%. So yeah, as I say, be very careful when looking at this. This guy doesn't give you a lot of data. It does tell you the battery, but it doesn't tell you whether you're charging or not. So yeah, and as you can see, we're now pulling nearly 4.2 amps there. So yeah, that's a full tilt charge. Right, let's close that. And that is a fixed laptop. So very lucky escape for this one. We had a little bit of corrosion on a spot of the motherboard that is extremely vulnerable. And if that had been 5mm to the top left there onto PP2V5, then this would be a much more significant repair job with a very severe danger to both the data and just the motherboard as a whole. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Bye.